Hi everybody, Louise here with my 144 topics, and this week I'm talking about the importance or the power of loneliness. And this was spurred to me because yesterday I had a client and I was just in such admiration of this lady, and I was in real admiration of her amongst the chaos in her life, the composure and the centeredness that she had within herself. So I was just going to talk a little bit about, the power of that, and really about, with loneliness and the connection to the self. So the first part of these talks that I'm doing is about connection. So one of my core words is about connection. And, what has, in the work that I do and the seminars that I do, what has been really amazing and for me that I've been aware of is how, loneliness has really affected people's lives and even my life. So, at one stage in my life, I was married. I had 5 children there. We were living in 5 children. There was 7 people in the house, but I felt really, really alone. And it was really only later, like in the last 6 months or so, the processes that I'm doing, the things that I've been learning, that I really was aware that I'd actually been lonely all my life. So, I was really a black sheep. I was one of the black sheep, and all you black sheep out there, I'm sure you're relating to this. That there was just always something a little bit different. There was always something a bit different about me, that I didn't quite fit into the norm, the family rituals and the things that were going on. I just didn't quite gel. My father would say to me, why do you dress like you do, and why do you do what you do, and why are you so different? Well, the fact of the matter is that we're all different. So, I really became aware of that feeling of loneliness and how debilitating that could be. So when I was, another sense of belonging I had as well was the fact that, I was born in Australia, here in Australia where I live. And from the age of 3, I actually went back to England. My parents went back to England, and I never had a sense of belonging. So this is, connected to the loneliness. Like, I never actually felt like I belonged. And it wasn't until, later on, I ended up getting, traveling, and I decided I'd come back to Australia. And as soon as I came back here, I felt I belonged. So, there are different aspects to this loneliness and this sense of belonging. And really part of the message that I'm talking to you about today is about the power of community and about the power of, feeling a part of a tribe, feeling part of a family, feeling part of a community. And that isn't just your family as it is. I'm talking about, what can be the cause of loneliness. I see people, and I work with people who have like 12 brothers and sisters, or they come from these large families, or they're one of 9 or one of 5 or one of 6 or whatever it is, but yet there can still be that sense of loneliness and still be that sense of not belonging. So, when I was 18, 19, I felt that I just had to get away from England. I didn't like it there. I wasn't happy there, but the reality was I wasn't happy wherever I was going. So I spent 6 years, traveling around the world, just looking for places to go. And then circumstances, I ended up having a child, living in Australia, studying. And it wasn't until I actually bought myself a farm, and I lived off the grid for 18 years. I was off the grid, no electricity, no power, water, tin shed, loved it. Many stories there, we'll go there later. That I actually found a sense of actually coming home to myself. And it's actually a really hard thing to describe, that feeling of actually feeling home in your own body when you don't know what that is. So to actually describe that to someone who doesn't have an understanding of what it is to come home to yourself, it's a very liberating feeling, and it also can give you very much a sense of freedom in the fact that, like, you can just be free to be who you are. And if family member says to you, why do you do what you do? You're like, well, that's just who I am. It's just who I am. There's no emotional charge and there's no connection with that. So, part of my intention when I was traveling was very much about looking for myself and finding for myself and seeing who and what I was and where I was going and things like that. So what can be the cause of loneliness? We can be living and be in an environment where we're so busy. We can be living in a city. I'm sure there's people who live in New York and Sydney or Melbourne or whatever it is, or whatever part of city it is, and they can still have that real sense of feeling alone. So it is something that happens within us. And the way that we're raised, the way that we're nurtured, You know, we part of the generational thing as well is that, you know, in as much as we can love our family, you know, do we share our love? Do we give our love? Do we, you know, do we give affection? Do we tell them how we feel? Do we tell them that we're proud of them? You know, I always wanted my father to say, I'm proud of you. You know, I always wanted to hear those words. But the reality is it doesn't happen, okay, and we don't often get that. So, you know, to find that sense of connection really is something within us. You know, part of me is quite not concerned, you know, because I know that there's always going to be a higher purpose behind things. But, you know, teenagers today, they can be very much lost in technology and computers and screens. You know, we're very much living in a screen world, you know, but on some level, you know, is there a connection that they're getting on that? You know, is there a connection that they're getting to, you know, to another tribe or to a community? So, you know, it's an online community as such, but yet that can still be your tribe, that can still be your spiritual group, you know, that can still be your spiritual family as such. You know, there will come a day when we, you know, people won't be so stigmatized by the word spiritual, because spiritual is what we are. We're mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. You know, we're not segregated. That's all connected for us. That all is part of what we are. So, you know, doing work with people, as I said, you know, it can be quite amazing to realize the debilitating effects that people can be having through the effects of loneliness, and how loneliness can really affect people. And even though other people might have a life of trauma or abuse and that sort of stuff, you know, that sense of loneliness can be very much quite debilitating in that way. So there are some studies out there sort of really showing some light on this. There's some study with addiction starting to sort of point towards the fact that, you know, part of the reason behind addictions is this loneliness, is this isolation. And even I wrote a course about eating disorders some time ago, and even with the research I was doing then, you know, there was studies or observations, probably more so is a better word, where people were actually noticing that when people who were obese or had eating disorders actually became part of a community, actually became part of a group, you know, the eating disorders changed, or weight loss came around, or whatever it was, that once people became part of something, that then helped them overcome that. So what I encourage people to do, and what part of my movement is very much about, is to encourage people to become connected. And the first place to become connected to is with yourself. So, you know, the first thing that you want to be doing is to be open to wanting that connection, and to be open to deepening that connection. Because some of us can be living around and living in what I call the walking dead. So we're pretending everything's fine, but, you know, in reality it's not. And there is a lot of freedom to be had in validating that crap. You know, we can talk about, you know, an alcoholic saying, I know I don't have a drinking problem, you know, and I can, a number of people, you know, who you can just, you know, I don't have a drinking problem, but, you know, once you can acknowledge the fact, you know what, I do have a friggin' problem. The problem is that I cannot drink, you know, I cannot go 30 days without drinking, so that is a problem. So we can't change anything till we can acknowledge it. So it's really time to stop friggin' sugarcoating stuff and actually be a bit real about what's going on. Because when we can start being real about what's going on, we can actually start lifting back, you know, and getting to the core of what's really happening. And, you know, once people can acknowledge the fact that they feel alone, like I feel alone, then you're in a space where you can actually do and change things about that. So the first thing is always going to be to acknowledge that, you know, and to be open to change that. And the second thing is to take some action. So I've joined a dancing rock and roll group, I've joined a singing group. So, you know, there's so much out there now, and it doesn't have to be you know, it doesn't have to be face-to-face. You know, I've got a Facebook group. The Facebook group's called Connect and Heal. By all means, jump in, you know. It's just a space for people to connect and share. And we only really share when we connect how we feel. You know, and I'm feeling in this video that admiration that I have for this client, for her ability to stay connected to herself. So in all this adversity and in all this craziness and all this madness, she was able to connect to herself, which is just really amazing, and to keep that connection with herself, which is, that is the most powerful thing that you have, and that is something that can never be taken away from you, is you and who you are and knowing who you are. So, just in completion, part of the next journey that I'm doing is something called the Higher Laws, and part of this Higher Laws journey is actually teaching people the element of self-autonomy, and teaching people processes and practices and strategies that can help them to become self-autonomous in what they're doing and actually be guiding their own life. So, if you are a black sheep, then stand up, be proud of it. Acknowledge who you are, acknowledge what your gifts are. Learn to be a master of you, of who you are, of what you're doing. And when you become self-autonomous, it means that you don't need to be running to the doctor, or you don't need to be running to the therapist, or you don't need to be running off to do another course, because you have everything that you need, okay? The loneliness is shared. You go beyond that loneliness and you start to connect to yourself in a deeper level. And part of the huge breakthrough phases and stages in my life have been very much about connecting to my inner child, connecting to my higher self, connecting to source energy, to your God, whatever it is. Okay, this isn't about religion. This is about stepping into a higher realm of living. So if you want to find out more about the Higher Laws, go to www.thehigherlaws.com, and then you'll have information there about where I'm running these around Melbourne at this stage. And come and learn about self-autonomy. Come and learn about having practices and strategies and things in your life where you can just be totally you, and you can be free to be you, and to lift that veil of loneliness, because it's a very powerful thing. It's a very debilitating thing. And as I mentioned before, the power of loneliness can lead to addictions. It can lead to overeating, eating disorders, obesity, sickness, disease. There's a whole array of things. And when you get to that point in your life where you're feeling lonely and alone, I actually will commend you in that, because that's a very good space to be, okay? Because you're getting through breakthrough spaces. So until then, take care of yourself, seeing you're always in love and light, and in happiness and health. From Louise Plant, the spiritual educator. I will catch you next time. So blessings. Goodbye.